Happy today. I am William Brown from IamWilliamBrown.com. This is Disconnect to Connect One Word Conversations. One Word Conversations is a relationship building, self-discovery conversation designed to invite you to look at your language. Many times we come up with all the lovely words that we can think of and still find ourselves in a place of disconnection. And I'm experiencing that right at this moment. You do not know. But I am suggesting that we have a one-word conversation so we can learn a little bit more about ourselves, the person that we're speaking with, and build on our relationships. One Word Conversation is brought to you by IamWilliamBrown.com, a place to help you be yourself and live your life. One way that I spotlight what's available at the I Am William Brown store is our U cards. Our U cards are a part of the Beyond the Shell series. Beyond the Shell series is a series of children's books, Finding You Beyond What Protects You and The Journey to Stay You, and a journal of You Are Complete. So the U cards that I picked for this conversation is I Am Lovable, You Are Curious, and the quote card is It's You I Like. This is the moment where I invite you to like, share, ask questions, subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube so you can be alerted when we go live again. So this is one of those conversations where it's a mystery. This is one where my guest has invited the opportunity to have the word live on the show so we can have a conversation within there. So as I do, I invite my guest in so we can have a conversation. Happy today. Hi, how are you? I am doing great. This is the moment that I invite my guests to introduce themselves however it feels comfortable to them.
I'm Vironika. I am a writer and a poet. Was a nomad up until very recently in the COVID epidemic. It's been a really interesting, fluid journey over the past few years. So it's kind of hard to self-define what it is that I'm doing. I've taken a really big turn from self-help to poetry, but I think at the very end of the day, I'm somebody who is really committed to art and self-awareness and to my own journey and like other people's journeys. And, I'm just a person who's here.
Right.
For whatever's going on.
Right. Wonderful. I definitely appreciate it. I really, reached out to you after reading your self-help book from a number of years ago. It really kind of set some things, I don't want to say straight for me, but really kind of allowed me to kind of look at myself and see how self-discovery and self-awareness was showing up in a raw frankness instead of sometimes the nice self-help way, of doing things. And so reading your book, The Art of Talking to Yourself, really created this space for me to just show up. So I want to acknowledge you for that. And so it's kind of, this is the moment where I introduce the word, and it is, it's the universe has been playing like tricks on me, right? I don't know about you. We just have this like game type of thing. And when I saw this word, I was going to change the word before you even knew that I was what the word was. And I decided to go with it. The word is, and so the word is appropriate. And so Yeah. And so,
Yeah.
so the question that I asked for you, is how does that word land for you?
I mean, I think it's pretty hard to think about this word without being like in the moment with it. And
Right.
I think what's really interesting is that, like, I mean, as an artist, especially, like, there's this line between. There's always been this line between who I am publicly
Right.
and who I am privately, and like what is appropriate for me to show to people, and what it is appropriate to keep behind the backstage. So I think it's just really interesting that you and I, before this show started, we had kind of like a tense moment where, it was like it really affected like the channels of communication.
Right.
And then, this word comes up, and there's really the question of like, how far are we going to go in terms of being honest about it? And I think the choice that I've been making in every single step of my life and of
Right.
my creative journey is being like, man, like, I'm just going to be real about what
Right.
it is that's going on and try to learn something from what it is that's going on with me and around me and how it
Right.
makes me feel. And yeah, I think propriety is a really interesting. It's a really interesting thing to talk to a feminist about, because it's like, even when I present my bio, sometimes I'm not like, hey, I'm an activist, I'm a feminist, because sometimes I feel like that's um, it's just a really interesting way to like define yourself when you first start a conversation with somebody, right? Like, if you run into
Right.
somebody on the street and they're like, hey, how are you? Tell me about you. The first thing flying out of my mouth being like, hey, I'm a feminist, is
Right.
it feels pretty intense. And so sometimes like I just, skim over that part. And so the fact that like I skimmed over it in my introduction and was like, whatever, don't really need to mention it. And then, this word comes up, it's yeah, it's all kind of like clicking in a really interesting way.
Yeah. For me, and I appreciate, that, you sharing that, in because appropriate for me, I don't know, lands for me that try to keep me in relationship with people. There's a feeling that if I'm not appropriate, there will be a disconnection. I will create
Mm,
disconnection with someone. So, it's not keeping it real. It's keeping it
mm,
appropriate, is
mhm,
what it, and so for me, wanting to, honor you as a guest and want to be, the good podcast host and do all of these, fanboy activities, and then feel like I said something that is not appropriate. And it's like, what the hell, right? Well, it is everything within me is like, you are creating disconnection, or you could be creating disconnection by not being appropriate, or not being
yeah,
seen as appropriate. And it just, there's this feeling of this, it's not even what's appropriate to me, it's not appropriate to other people. It's just, it it's like, at that moment, not until the
mm,
moment happens, then appropriate is declared.
right.
Yeah. So that's what's going on in the space.
Well, I think what's really important to recognize too, though, is that what when like when we have miscommunications, or when
Right.
people communicate something, like, there's no there's no way to keep the truth back. And so I think a lot of the time when people overstep each other's boundaries, it's not about creating a disconnection, it's about recognizing a disconnection that already exists and
Huh.
highlighting into something that's already there. Like, I think that's really been a topic that's really important, like, 2020 onward, and the world just completely changing, and thinking about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And I think people take so much time to figure out, what can I say and what can I not say? What can I do and what can I not do, so that I don't
Right.
offend people? But at the end of the day, anything that is said or done from the heart is coming from a place of behavioral conditioning, right? Like we've
Right.
all been trained to be a certain way, and we live in a certain society. And so, there's a lot of like different intersections. Like as a feminist, I really believe in intersectionality. I think it's not just about like men, women. It's also about like cis, trans. It's about race. It's about socioeconomics. It's about disability and ability. It's about different abilities. Like it's about how people are functioning within their environment and how they're interacting with a system. And so I think recognizing that certain people are having a certain kind of time,
Right.
and being faced with certain kinds of commentary and certain kinds of experiences, and accidentally stepping on those boundaries and sandpapering somebody's triggers. I mean,
Right.
I do this too, right? Like
Right.
I'm like, oh no, I messed up. Like I can't believe what I've done. Like I just want to be, be unoffensive to anybody unless it's on purpose, right? Like,
Right.
unless I'm trying to like, unless I'm trying to bring something out in the open that I'm like, okay, this is a truth bomb. This is going to be a thing. Like, I don't want to accidentally rub on somebody's boundaries and then misunderstand what I've done. But at the end of the day, it's an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity for learning. Like there's a lot of things like as a woman, as somebody that identifies as a woman, like there's just a lot of things that you hear over and over and over and over and over. And so your triggers are different, and like a trans person might go through a certain kind of experience. And then that experience, like somebody might push on it and then that person reacts. And I think it's almost the way that we react to offending people is almost selfish. Like when I'm like, oh, have I offended you? I just want to keep being the good person. Like I want to stay in this place where I'm not having had offended you. And then turning it into this empathy thing is like, whoa, I hurt you. I didn't mean to, obviously, but something hurts. And how can I support you through that? Like, how can I learn from this situation? And I mean, I think I don't know anybody who's good at that.
I really appreciate that because I didn't realize how, I don't know, how selfish I was being, because it was just like, I'm a good person, and now, they may think that I'm a horrible person and that I'm all of these other labels and all that, please, just ignore anything else that I've possibly said. I didn't know that this would kind of create this type of space, but now that we're here, just like ignore that, right? Right, and just go from there. And so you're giving me access to myself in the really, because it's not even about being appropriate for you, it's appropriate for me. So I can hold on to this, how I see myself, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And it's like crap, right?
I mean, I get it. I really get it. And I think having these moments of like looking back on the way that we've acted and saying, wow, that was really inappropriate. Like I've stayed up like so much of certain nights, just looking back on my behavior in certain situations and being like, that was really, really inappropriate. Just the way that I've entered certain spaces because of like my insecurity about what kind of space I was in and what kind of people I was dealing with and what kind of attention I was used to. I feel like I've come into certain spaces being way too loud, like just taking up way too much space. And that's been something that I look back on and I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope that nobody who is listening to my stuff now remembers me being this way, because that's so embarrassing. But then when I really think about that feeling, like if I hadn't changed, then I wouldn't be having that feeling. If I couldn't look back on my past self and like cringe about the things that she'd done, then that would mean I'm still her. And obviously these things they're not something that is unique to me personally. This is something like walking into a certain kind of space. It's just like those kinds of spaces are used to people like me acting in the way that I did. And so recognizing that and owning that and saying like, hey, I've learned something about myself, and I'm not really sure where I picked up these behaviors from, but they're actually not they're not appropriate to the situation because they interrupt the vibe. And
Right.
it's also not something that I want to perpetuate. And so it's like taking that as a learning moment, it's going to cause embarrassment. So
Right.
I think any
Right.
kind of growth, any kind of learning comes with so much shame. You know,
Right.
like you were talking
Wow.
about the art of talking to yourself. And for the longest time, I agreed with everything in that book. And so I had this, you know, kind of like nice relationship with it.
Right.
And then recently there's been something that I thought, oh, kind of wish I hadn't said that.
Mm.
And then it starts like haunting me, you know, like, oh, it was just so wrong for me to say that. Like, that's not an appropriate thing to put into a self-help book 3/4 of the way through when somebody already trusts me and they're in it with me and it's like
Right.
this journey. And then I'm saying this thing. And I got this urge to go back and like fix it, you know, to just go
Mm.
back and like fix the words and fix all the things. And I think I really, in those moments, I really have to step back and say, my life right now is a
Mm.
testament of how I think differently.
Right.
I think
Mm.
somebody
Got
looking
it.
back at my past work and saying, oh, she was different then than she is now, then that's just, it's just the evolution. And so I think
Right.
propriety is really something that is ever changing. Like it's fluid to a moment, to a
Right.
place, to like a time in my life, in my heart, in the environments that I'm in. And I've had so much shame about how that's been a disconnect or how the present disconnects with the past or how it might disconnect in the future. And it's such a waste of time. Like it's actually, I'm exhausted just talking about it right now. Like it's so, oh,
You know, I totally get it. And it's like really embracing the being present, really being present. And how that shows up for me is just like, I'm just here. I'm nowhere else. And then looking back at that moment and I don't want to say judging it or being ashamed of it or being like confused by it or any because of the moment that I'm in now, it is kind of I don't I don't want to say confusing, but it's like how can I appreciate that present moment like in your book that where you were, what was important, what you valued, what you wanted to share in that present moment and not see it any less in the evolution of you years later
mm-hmm.
and just say hey that was appropriate for that time in my life.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else that I could have said because I was present to my life.
Wow. Yeah. I feel that.
And it is just, you know, it feels like for me, I want these constant do-overs, right? You know?
Yeah.
You know, and it's just like, hey, this is wonderful. And it's like a year later, oh, I want to do over on that one. You know, I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, and they'll make it so much, but I wouldn't be in this present moment if I wouldn't have been present in that moment to, and shown up. Good Lord. So I don't know what, I don't know what just happened there, but it just feels like for me that there is this state of trying to not live my life but clean up my life. Self-awareness is showing up as I am saying, hey, I wasn't aware of myself back then, so this is, you know, now that I'm aware, just kind of just you know gloss over that, you know, and just kind of repairing this. And it's just that is it's just the evolution of my life.
And it's so toxic. It's actually
Right.
so toxic. And when I was in self-help, that was one of the things that was so throttling for me. Like I used to go by, so now I go by Vironika Wilde. And Vironika Wilde was the pen name that I had. It wasn't just a pen name really. Like it was just the name that I went by. It's not my birth name. Like my birth name is Vironika Tugaleva and I went by Vironika Wilde. And there was all this stuff that was in it, you know, like I was like a super goth and was doing all these drugs and had really poor mental health and like a slew of eating disorders. And I went by this like pseudonym, and it was like this like kind of badass bitch archetype, you know, and I lived it and I felt it, you know, I felt that within me. And so like when my mental health broke down and when I came like super close to suicide, it was like I flipped. And so I took all of my like size 0 clothes and I gave those away because I was like, I don't want to be trying to go for this again, you know? And I gave away all of this stuff, like everything that I thought was keeping me down. And what I really meant by keeping me down was that it was tying me to this like Vironika Wilde character. And so the more that I got into self-help, the more I tried to, you know, just kill off those parts of the person that I'd been, because it's like, ooh, could I really like have listened to dubstep and still be a spiritual person? I don't think so. I think I should listen to more like Portishead or whatever. And then it's like, do I really want to listen to Portishead? Maybe I should just listen to some meditation music. And like I stopped wearing makeup in those days too. And it was like, I had written that in my first book that I'd stopped wearing makeup. I stopped doing drugs and I stopped smoking. I stopped all this stuff. And then it was like creating this identity that became the new appropriate. And so I had to be this person. I had to continue to be this person. And it's almost like it didn't matter what I wanted, because the people that were following me at the time loved the fact that I didn't wear makeup. You know, they loved the fact that I like had taken all my piercings out. They loved the fact that I never used hair dye, you know, like it was just like, I had grown to love this person that I thought other people loved. And as time went on, like it was really throttling, because I threw everything out when I threw Vironika Wilde out. I threw out the poetry, I threw out the music, because I was like, well, I don't need to be angsty anymore, you know, like I'm happy, I'm spiritual. And this part of me, like it kept trying to come back, but it mostly kept trying to come back by trying to lure me into various substances. And that was really easy to, I think it was really easy to deflect, because it feels like, okay, I'm just, you know, craving things that are bad for me. But then sometimes I would just want to feel, you know, I would just want to feel like alive instead of inspiring. I just wanted to feel raw instead of just like this beacon of spiritual light. Like I just didn't want to be that. I didn't want to be trying to be a role model. And it really happened slowly. I think it was like the first time that I smoked weed after not smoking it for like 4 years. That had become legal in Canada in the time that I'd been like traveling the world. And it was like, wow, this isn't like evil. You know what I mean? This isn't like the most evil thing ever. And I think it began this journey of discovering like, okay, how much of Vironika Wilde do I want back? You know, do I want all the stuff, or do I just want some of the stuff? And I feel like I made really poor choices at some points during that journey, but never to the point that I was at before. You know, I didn't like end up in these like crises that I couldn't escape from. I wasn't self-destructive to the point of like harming myself in irreparable ways, but I feel like I had to experiment with where those boundaries lay. And the more that I did that, the more this new art started coming through me. Like I started writing poems about, you know, how much resentment I have for my dad. And like I wrote a poem about this the other week. Like it's not really something that you can just like sit down and say, I'm just going to spiritual universal love out all the issues in my life, because it's like a fluid process, you know, like having resentment for your father that like comes up any single time that you feel something around or with a man that like you're close to. It's a fluid process. Like some days it just means like listening to Cardi B, and like some days it means writing an angsty poem. And some days it means like going for a walk and trying to not talk to anybody because I'm just going to get angry at somebody, you know? And some days it's recognizing the parts of him that are in me that I hate. And those are the really uncomfortable days, And it's like this constant fluid process. And that's just me, you know? And like I used to, in the self-help days, say, okay, well, I have this speech, and what kind of shoes does a spiritual teacher wear? And like, what kind of, like, what am I supposed to look like? What am I supposed to wear? What am I supposed to? And I'm like, well, I definitely can't wear makeup because this is what people expect from me. And like, sometimes before I go on these shows now and like somebody's talking to me about the art of talking to yourself, I'm like, should I really be wearing like this black nail polish? You know, like, should I have this like dye in my hair? Like, should I have that? And then I'm like, well, I do.
Right.
You know, it's like what you were saying before, like you're just being honest to yourself in the moment. Like when I stopped trying to be this thing that I had constructed as like Vironika Wilde, and I was like, I'm going to bring back all these parts of me that I killed off. My immediate reflexive action was to try to kill off Vironika Wilde. Like, this is like some kind of multiple personality disorder kind of thing where like I can't let them coexist in the same space at the same time. And so right now, trying to let them coexist, this part of me that was all like, you know, spiritual and connected to the earth, and this part of me that is like really like, you know, goth witch woman, like I have to make those play along. Like I have to be able to be a spiritual person and a feminist at the same time. I have to know that everything's going to be okay at some level, and also be working for justice and like just picking up the phone and making phone calls and like just being involved in the things that I care about, while also knowing that at a larger level, like everything completely works out. And trying to make those two sides of me interact, there's this constant conversation about, well, you shouldn't do that. Like one side of me is trying to tell the other side that you shouldn't do that because that's not appropriate. That's not the thing. But really what I'm saying is that's not what people expect, because that's not what people have seen. Like you have to choose one side. You have to do the unconditional love spiritual thing, or you have to do the badass bitch feminist thing. Like you can't do both. And it's like, well, if you've got them both in you, like I really don't know what else you can be. Like I think the most appropriate thing I can do is just be what I am. And it's I think it's only hard because I don't have a lot of like role models for that. I don't have a lot of people that I can look at and say, wow, I feel like this person is really wise, but then they're like really fun too. Like I think the closest thing to me is like Billie Eilish. Like I think I have this like worship of Billie Eilish, and I think she's probably the best at it. Or like Tash Sultana, you know, but I really can't. Yeah, it's like carving the new road, and like it's not going to feel appropriate because you're making a new path. Like it's not, there's nothing proper going on. Like you're cutting down trees, right?
There is, and I totally appreciate. There's so many things that in your sharing that I got, and there is a quote from, I forget his name. I think it's named James Campbell or something. I can't remember who it is. And it's like, if you can see the path in front of you, it's not your path. Your path is the one that you are creating. And being okay with that. And, you know, it's my conversation around labels, right? That we are our labels and we're not our labels at the same time. And the more that that you embrace that there is this and to my life, and that's how it came up in the cards. It's you I like. Sometimes it is in my self-awareness journey. There is liking all of me, you know, even the places and the areas where I want to like hide or cover up, you know, or or kind of dismiss and because when we're in the moment, right? When we are in the moment, whatever part of ourselves that we are willing to share, right, and own, and embrace, will be the appropriate response. You know, so sometimes badass needs to show up, right? Right? And for me, I have a nice guy label, right? That sometimes he shows up and sometimes I don't know where the hell he is. But there were many times in my life that was the default. And it was mainly to my demise, that in that moment, the nice guy didn't need to be there and wasn't serving me. But that's who I believe needed to be, was the appropriate way of me showing up. maybe because of my blackness, maybe because whatever, the nice guy needed to be there, or, a lot of people would be uncomfortable with that. And I
Mm.
really got to a place where it's like, you know what? The nice guy isn't appropriate to be here. I need to
Mm.
I need to say what I need to say,
Yeah.
and just deal with that. And I am all of those. That's all of me, and be okay with that.
Mm. That felt good you saying that, actually, like just the things that we put on, not only to be nice, but I think what you're also highlighting here is like in order to stay safe
Mm.
and like try to carve out this like safe space where you're going to protect yourself from the kinds of things that you've been exposed to.
Right.
Right. And it's like, I think rejection and judgment and misunderstanding, like those things hurt so much more than I think people even give them value for, right? And
Right.
I think that's what I was trying to do, like in these spiritual days. Like I kept so many people around that were um, just really bad for me. They were really bad for
Mm.
my business. They were really bad for my mental health. Like the relationship that I was in was super toxic, but like I could not let these people go because I was like, well, if I'm this compassionate person
Right.
and I'm going to have compassion for my past self who was really, there are people out there, there are multiple people, there are probably dozens of people who hate me out there in the world,
Mm.
like rightfully, and I'm not going to try to change their mind because I've done horrible things to them.
Right.
And that's something that I didn't want to recreate. I was like, I don't
Mm.
want anybody to ever hate me. But then, you go this total opposite way, and the things that you tolerate
Mm.
and the things that people manipulate you into tolerating, and they don't even understand that they're
Wow.
manipulating you. Like being in a relationship with somebody that constantly was like feeding us both this story of how things were going to change and things were going to get better, and if only you believed in me more, if only you didn't give so much to me, then I would
Mm.
have a better sense of confidence and that I would be performing better. If only you believed more in me, then I would have
Wow.
a better sense of confidence. Like literally, this story just kept changing, and it's like why it's my fault
Right.
that he's behaving the way that he's behaving, and it's like we're both buying into that,
Mm.
right? Like if I had just taken that time and said, you know what, I don't buy that. Like, I don't buy your version of what's going on here. And you
Right.
can't string me along for your little ride of what you're going to tell me is going on here just because you want to keep me in your bed. Like, that's not
Right.
okay.
Right.
And there's so much like pressure and so much guilt and such a feeling of like, it doesn't feel safe to say
Mm.
that. And it doesn't feel like a relationship can even continue after you've said something like that, after you've set a
Right.
boundary, like, you can't talk to me like that and
Right.
continue to be in a relationship with me. And what I've really learned is like, if they can't stop talking to me like that, then I'm not going to be in a relationship with them. There's like
Right.
7 billion people in the world. Like, I'm okay. Like, I don't
Right.
need anybody that bad that I need to tolerate things that feel wrong to
Right.
me. Right.
Wow.
Like, that's self-love. That's the highest, not only self-love, but I think love for people, where you're like, I love you so much that I'm not going to let you talk to me like that because you're
Right.
going to regret this, because it's going to have emotional consequences on me and on you. And then you're just going
Right.
to feel guilty about it and carry it around. So I'm not going to let that happen to either of us. And I'm just going to put a
Right.
stop to it. Right.
Right. And I think that's why, one part of the many parts in the art of talking to yourself that kind of really sat with me of, there's a difference between self-love and self-protection, right? And there have been many times when I was just protecting, right, and not loving, because I wasn't saying, right, I wasn't saying, yeah, you can't talk to me that way. I don't believe that story that you're saying, and
Yeah.
and I felt that I was protecting the relationship, right, myself, all these identities, this way of showing up, and I didn't see myself as lovable, right? And so I was allowing that situation, person, relationship to kind of dictate my relationship to myself. Because, I convinced myself that they knew better, right? Because there were many questions that I wasn't asking myself, right? There's certain parts of my religious upbringing that it wasn't appropriate to ask those questions, right? There's just questions that you just didn't ask. You just kind of, that's how it was. This is how you show up in your marriage. This is how you show up at, pick a location, right? There, pick a relationship, and that's how it should be. And there was this standard of appropriate that caused you not to show up, in your life. Or speak for myself, that caused me not to show up in my life. And so, yeah, I was like more committed to a standard that I didn't understand or didn't appreciate, but it was, it was running the show.
Yeah. And who are you trying to please? I think at the end of the day, the most interesting thing is like who we're trying to please, because I certainly don't please myself by trying to maintain whatever status quo I think I'm supposed to be maintaining. And I don't think I'm actually pleasing the people who watch me doing that, because there's some like stink of inauthenticity. It really does. It stinks. And you can feel it. Like when somebody's not showing up as exactly what they are, like I think you can get followers, you can get book sales, you can get pretty far, but there's something off, there's something that's not right. And the people that are following you are also going to be people that are carrying this something's off. And then you've just gathered a community of having this like confidence where something's off. And then the people that follow you, like something's off. And it doesn't mean it's bad, but you've basically just like gathered a bunch of people around you who have the same wounds that you have. And I think it's an opportunity too. And I think that's what I realized too. Like after I had gone through self-help, I was like, all of these clients that I'm working with, like they're all in these toxic relationships that they can't seem to be able to leave. And I'm in this relationship, right? And like, if I don't leave, none of these people are going to leave. And it doesn't mean like if I leave, then they're going to, but it was like, who am I hiding this for?
Right.
Like I was doing such a job concealing just how many problems that relationship had from the people that were reading my work. But at the same time, something was transmuting. And these people kept reaching out to me who were having these issues. And then I would find myself saying things that I wasn't necessarily practicing, Like I do still think that self-love is the most important thing. And as long as you feed self-love into yourself, then you will know whether the relationship is right or wrong. You don't have to make a decision about whether to stay or leave. You just have to love yourself enough to hear the answer. And this is a great philosophy, but the fact is that I was with this person for 7 years and like I knew it was done 6 months in. And so there was like there was just something there, there was something there that was off for me and I didn't really know what it was. And it was like this, I had shoved all this trauma that I had spiritually bypassed. Like I think bypassing is a really important thing to look at in the self-help sphere, because so many people are in not healing and they're just bypassing the things. And then they're just building up this kind of sack of baggage that they carry around and they don't know why. And then they're trying to let go of their anger. Even that language, like, I want to let go of my anger. I want to let go of all these things. And it's like, you can't let go of your anger because you're not holding it. It's holding you. You have to look at it in the eyes and talk to it until it lets go of you. Like you're not letting go of anything. As the more you try to push it away, the more it's just going to come back. And so I think just recognizing where we're at and what we're going to do with what it is that we're being presented with,
Right.
It reverberates to the people around us in ways that we cannot possibly understand. Like,
Wow.
I was not talking about what was going on in that relationship when it was going on. And now that I look back, I was affecting the people around me. I was affecting the people that were reading my work. I was affecting people, even though I was leaving so much out. There was
Right.
just something that I was sending out. And I think the choice to be honest and authentic to oneself and
Right.
to be able to walk in shoes that you've never walked in before, carve your own path, that also helps send these ripples out and then affects people in ways that I can't possibly understand right now. But all I know is that
Right.
it feels better. Like, it feels better to not worry about whether or not I'm adhering to some norm, because it doesn't feel good even when I do adhere to it, and nobody
Right.
likes it. I
Right.
don't, they don't. Like, there's no reward. Like, there's actually
Right.
no.
Right. But we like hold on to it like there's a reward in this. There, I am going to get these
Yeah.
brownie points, these something, I don't know what what I believe that I'm going to get, but I'm going to get something if I hold on to to this way of being. There's the one thing that that was coming up because you I don't want to say you're a wordsmith or something, but you create worlds with language. I think we all do, right? We create a world around that. And so there is a world around appropriate, right? Um, and um, and so within that world, I think we can create, right? And outside of that world of inappropriate, right? We create a world in language. Is there many times when you're creating, right, and when you're like showing up, that you're bumping up against appropriate and inappropriate in in your writing and how you're showing up?
It's really interesting. Like, when you were like, you're a wordsmith, like, like the immediate response of my brain is like, I can do better. And then I look at the word pop up and I'm like, hey, that word also says appropriate. And that's something that I think is really relevant in like the current poetry, spoken word.
Mm.
I mean, this is a really long conversation, like, to have about that specific thing. Like, all I can say really is that, um, when it comes to like, is this appropriate or not appropriate for me to share with people? Like, I think I've learned to be okay with people knowing me and people knowing the worst parts of me. And even like, if I'm dating somebody now, like, I'm not going to hold back if they make me cry, and or like, if we get into a fight or something, like, if something happens, I'm gonna write about it. I'm not gonna like go slander this person on social media and like put up their name and their handle and tell people to unfollow them, but I'm not
Right.
gonna censor my art in
Right.
order to keep somebody else comfortable. And I'm okay with that. And this is just a point that I've gotten to where I'm not afraid to show up as the person that I am. But I think where appropriate becomes appropriate too is like, as an artist, are you being respectful to the communities that you're involved with? Like, are
Mm.
you giving credit to the communities that you've been influenced by? Are you donating portions of proceeds that you're making back to the organizations that introduce you to these things? Because it's like, spoken word has its origins in like the southern United States and the Black community. And so, showing up as like a white artist in like a genre that was started by the Black community in the USA, like, I have a responsibility to not
Right.
just like pay my verbal respect, but like, I have responsibilities to like jump onto like certain issues and do whatever I can with the finances that I have available. And that's like a constant fluid journey of learning and trying to make better choices so that I'm not stealing, and so that
Mm.
I'm like being inspired. And there's a line there, like, there's a lot of so I found out that I'm half Russian indigenous
Mm.
like last year. I should have known, really, but that's a really long story too. And so there's all this talk in Canada, and I'm sure there's like in the States too, but there's all this talk of like the appropriation of like indigenous terms and like symbols, like
Right.
saying things like tribe. And it was like, when I found out that I'm indigenous, it was like, oh, well, I guess I can just use those words. And I think what I've really had to come back and say is, okay, but Russian indigenous and Canadian indigenousness is not the same thing. Like
Right.
there are at least like 6 different like nations that we're talking about that have like different beliefs and different sources of them. And
Right.
it's not like my own background can like let me off the hook of trying to think about how I relate to the world. And
Right.
so while I'm not afraid of showing up as a human being and being judged for these like shameful human emotions, I think I'm more and more as time goes on trying to understand how to be an artist in the world and understand just how many things are stolen and how many
Mm.
things don't have that credit coming back to them, and how can I live the kind of existence that, you know, if I have some kind of blessing come to me, how can I share that blessing? You know,
Hmm.
how can I support the other artists around me? How can I redirect my resources in a way that helps them? And like during the epidemic, like, I mean, I was really hit hard, like
Hmm.
financially by this epidemic, like anybody else. But I'm not going to use that as an excuse as to not donate to causes that I think are important. I'm not
Right.
going to use that as an excuse to just pull myself out of what I feel like is my social responsibility. So
Right.
I think that's like my biggest relationship with propriety, where I'm trying to do the right thing. And it's like so much of it is in silence. Like I'm trying to be pretty vague about, you know, what it is
Right.
that
Got it.
I'm
No, I got
doing.
it.
But I think trying to just like go through this thing of like decolonizing the self
Right.
and trying to find this different viewpoint where all these cultures and all of these um and not just cultures, you know, like just viewpoints and mythologies and histories and like people that have been taken from and had nothing given back to them, like how to cultivate an attitude of respect
Right.
for toward the people that are here and that are gone, who have influenced the world in all these positive ways while other people have taken credit. How to cultivate a sense of respect instead of a sense of, you know, oh no, I've been complicit in the covering up of this great theft and I'm just going to try to, you
Right.
know, like write it off. And like, you know, especially like knowing my heritage, you know, like in a certain way for a little while, like I was actually feeling like, oh, okay, I guess it just felt more comfortable, like it let me off the hook. And then
Right.
as
I
soon as
got it.
it let me off the hook, I put myself back on the hook, right? Because I'm like,
Right.
okay, I don't need to be let off the hook now.
Right. Yeah.
Like, because it's
Right.
an
There's
important process to like decolonization is a really important process. And so I think as we're all going through that, it's like, what is the new normal? What is the new proper? What is the way that we're all going to interact with each other if
right.
it's not this way that we've been doing so far? Because really like perfectionism, which I think is really like woven through a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about today,
Mm.
perfectionism is definitely like a colonial concept. It's something that's come to us with colonialism, has caused all these mental health issues, has come with commerce, has come with, you know,
Mm.
capitalism. And I think trying to solve these things on a larger level, it really helps take care of it on a smaller level, because we take so much responsibility for how insecure we all are. But
Right.
that insecurity is a really key part of the way that we're being controlled by larger powers who just want our dollars. So I think
Right.
being connected to that, that's that's becoming more and more important to me. Like I want to say it's important to me now, but I can see how over the course of the
Becoming more.
past few years it's just been growing. So I'm sure even in a few months it's going to be even more important, and I feel like I'm going to have more resources and more understanding of what I can do. Because right now I'm doing the best I can, but it's more of a question than anything.
Right. Wonderful. I think we can talk about this for hours. I think it's like we've opened up a series of
Yeah,
conversations
yeah.
within that. Um, is there any last thing that you want to like leave with anyone around appropriate, and what is, what does how that's showing up within this conversation?
I mean, I really like the Joseph Campbell quote that you said, like if you can see the path in front of you, it's not your path. I think that's the most important thing, is to look within oneself and create a rubric for your behavior from there. Like start with the direct understanding of how you react to the world, what things make you feel good and give you energy, and what things make you feel bad and drain your energy, and then build up from there. Like, what kind of people do I need to be around? What kind of things do I need to be engaged in? What's my purpose in this world? I
Right.
think coming from this level of respecting our reactions to things, it gives us the ability to control how we react to those reactions. But you can't change how you react to things. Like, you really can't. You can't change when you're bored by something.
Right. Right. That's what it is, right?
It is what it is, right? Yeah, so just
So,
being respectful to oneself and listening, and just trusting that that journey is going to end up somewhere that feels much better than pleasing people,
right.
where the art of loving oneself brings you to this place where you manifest people who will love you, not just feel moderately pleased by you, or like feel unoffended by your presence, who will
Right.
let you sit in the corner over there without asking you to leave, like having
Right.
the belief that you can be surrounded by people who genuinely love you for who you
Right.
are, and you don't have to put on anything. You're just
Right.
like there.
Right. And starting with ourselves, right? Starting with
Mm.
ourselves. Thank you very much. Um, there was I will admit there was a moment where I was like, she's gonna leave me. She's gonna never talk to me again. This is not gonna
Aw.
happen.
Aw.
This has been, thank you for this conversation. I've gotten a deeper understanding of appropriate. And that's what these conversations are all about, to expand our awareness of the language that is showing up. And so thank you.
Yeah, thank
Uh,
you as well. Thanks for being so open and receptive. I feel like I needed to have this conversation too, and I appreciate your willingness to go on this river, because a lot of people aren't. So,
well, I'm going to put you back in the green room. If you're able to stay for a couple minutes, that would be great as I close the
sure.
show. Okay. Appropriate. Uh, I um I so much get this conversation, and how I'm creating a world around that. And there's no benefit in that. It's like I'm like, as my dad label is like, what do you mean there's no benefit of being appropriate? Right? There's so many benefits, but it's really, at the end of the day, if we are not in a place of compassion and love and grace for ourselves, the appropriateness um, is just this people pleasing standard that there's no benefit in. I don't know. That's what I'm getting. Maybe there's more for me to get. I hope this conversation has brought value to you, not just to your day, but to your life. I invite you to reach out to me at imwilliambrown.com for a complimentary coaching session to help you be yourself and live your life. Because the world wants you, the world needs you, but the world isn't waiting for you. So go be you. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time on One Word Conversations.